Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. My hair is barely brushed today. It's Saturday. My beautiful guest did me a huge favor and came on. We had some scheduling stuff going on, and she is the best. And she came on last minute. And I got to give love to my favorite lady, Beth Grossman, who just sends me the most amazing people. So Beth, you know, I love you. What I will start with today is it is so hot here. I feel like a brat because I don't know. I'm going to find out where my guest lives in a second and she can come in and talk. But it is so hot here. I think it's going to be 90 and I live at the beach, which I talk about. And I sound like the biggest spoiled brat, but it is so hot. And a lot of times people that live at the beach don't have air conditioning. So I have air conditioning in like the front of my house, but not the whole house. So like all I did last night was just sweat. Like it was awful. The windows were open. I had fans going and I'm just not used to it being this hot. And I'm like, we just have to have air conditioning in the whole house. It's a constant fight. And everyone's like, oh, it's only hot for like a couple weeks. No, it's hot. It is hot. Our planet is hotter. Everyone should be able to have air conditioning, period. No matter like where you are, who you are, air conditioning is a must. Also, the year is in full swing and my kids are back at school. And you think you have so much time during that period of time when they're at school, but all I end up doing is doing a few things and then turning around and picking them up. And now they're at two different schools. So it's like the life of an Uber driver, which I'm kidding, but that's basically what I am, is continuing because there's just activities every single day.
We've all been put here for a reason and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Tamala Floyd, I would love to bring you in right now. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful, Meghan, and very happy to be here with you.
I can't wait to talk to you. You have the most beautiful smile. So Tamala Floyd, she works in healing personal and generational trauma with internal family systems therapy, IFS. Her book is called Listening When Parts Speak, a practical guide to healing with internal family systems therapy and ancestor wisdom. It is a self-help support to working with trauma and intergenerational trauma, which stands for IFS without the T. Did I just butcher that? Because I tend to do that. What do you think?
So the IFS is actually the internal family systems therapy.
Okay.
IFS.
This is what happens when I attempt to read a bio and pretend like I'm not reading a bio. I mean, everyone that listens and has been with me since the beginning knows I'm a little bit of a hot mess, but I'm trying to keep it together. How are you today? Are you good? This Saturday?
Really good. Yeah. Yes, it's Saturday. It's a great day. You spoke about it being hot. Where I am, it's 90 degrees. And yes, that is the air conditioner right there behind me, keeping things cool.
Yeah, we need it. Where are you located?
Currently, I am in Cancun, Mexico. So this is the thing, Meghan, that you may not know about me, but I am a digital nomad. So I live everywhere and nowhere.
Well, you're lucky, but okay, that is hot though. That's like hot. And during the summer months in Cancun, right? It's that humidity and yeah. But it's gosh, I love Mexico. What a life though, to be able to be a digital nomad and live wherever you want to live.
Yes, I love it.
Sounds like a great life. Okay, so I always ask my guest where they're from and I go from there. So let's start with where you're from and a little bit about your childhood, and then we're going to go into more of your story.
Yeah. So I'm a native Californian. I grew up in Marina Del Rey. I ended up living at some point not too far from where you live in Long Beach, California. I went to school at Cal State Long Beach. And the last place I lived in California was in the mountains in San Bernardino before moving away.
And tell me a little bit about your childhood. Marina Del Rey is beautiful. All the seals are out. My dogs like to go on walks near the seals and look at all the boats. It's such a beautiful place. Tell me a little bit about there.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, not a problem. In the 70s, in a new development community when we moved in, we were my parents were the first ones to own the house that we lived in. Loved living there, loved going to the beach. At the time, they were just putting in like the bike path. And so we would go down there and ride and walk. Love the restaurants, obviously eating. I am a foodie. However, I went to, I am African American, and Marina Del Rey was not a community with a lot of Black folks at that time. When we lived there, I was the only Black, there were other people of color, but Black little girl in my school until my younger sister came to the school, and there's 5 years between us. So I was a fifth grader, but once she came in, so that had its challenges. Certainly, just being a Black family in a predominantly white community in the 70s.
So growing up, it sounds like you had a pretty good childhood growing up in Marina Del Rey.
I did.
Tell me a little bit about like your life in general after like just some of the things that happened to you and why you got into the intergenerational trauma piece of this and why you went into what you're in today.
Yes. So often you have guests on your show who've experienced trauma. And although I'm a psychotherapist, I am not trauma-free. I grew up in a home where there was physical violence between my parents. And so as a very young child, I was exposed to that and often felt like my job, and I'm talking from like 5 years old, was to protect my mother. Like that was what I needed to do. My little 5-year-old mind felt like I somehow could keep her safe. And so growing up in that environment, at some point when I went to school, I was very interested in abuse towards women. So physical abuse, sexual abuse, and then became more of an expert as it relates to sexual abuse histories with women. Because I just looked at the violence that my mother experienced and, of course, wanted to move into helping women who also had experienced that type of violence and letting them know that that's not something they need or have to stay in. At some point, my mother did leave my father. I think I might have been 10 or 11 when that happened. But, knowing that this was what was happening in the family, that, their marriage. It was interesting when I talk about living and growing up in Marina Del Rey, there were things about my childhood that were very idyllic, but they hid what was going on in the house. It was like, there was this outward family that you saw that was really important to my father, that be the projection. But then there was this ugliness that was happening in the house with him abusing my mother.
Isn't that so common though? I mean, it's like you can't help as a human being to always like drive around and look at other people's houses and look at other people's lives and just think like, wow, they have this great life. And a lot of times these people, these men, especially that are physically abusive, that's what they do. It's all about like manipulation and also portraying a certain image. I know that I have like dear friends that have sadly gone through physical abuse and marriages, and same thing. It sounds like that's a very common thing for these men. They need to like make sure that they are portraying themselves as like this certain way, but behind closed doors, it's a whole different story. And,
absolutely.
Right. So is that a common thing? Because I know this is what you talk about. Is that common? I would just love to know that. Yeah.
It's very common because many men obviously they don't want people to know that they're abusing their family or their wives or whomever, but they also want you to see them as very different from the way that they show up in the family. Like, one of the things that was really important to my dad is that we all be what I would say perfect. You know, there was a way to project yourself, a way to speak, a way to walk. And we had to be this way. But that was so different from our experiences day to day in the home. So I do believe that many men want to project this image that is very different from the meanness, the shortness, the ugliness that might be happening with their children or with their significant other. That's really
tell me too, like, what that was like, because it's like, sounds like it was like a prison. Like, you're worried about your mom constantly.
Yeah.
Did your father grow up with abuse? Because a lot of times, as you know, this.
Absolutely. And that is what I was saying absolutely too is, yes, usually that is, we know that the perpetrator had also experienced some type of abuse or trauma. It might not have been abuse. It might have been some other type of trauma. Interesting that you asked that, because I asked my father, years later as an adult, many decades later, what was your childhood like with some of the things that happened to us and in our family? And he just made it seem like things were fine, that there was no trauma, that there was a point in his life where he had to take care of younger siblings in his senior year of high school. And I only know this because my mother has told me this story because they grew up in the same town. But when I brought that up to him, well, what must that have been like to have your parents gone and you're taking care of 3 younger sisters, your senior year of high school? And he said, well, that's just what we did back then. So it was just minimized completely. So I don't know. Outside of that, I really don't know what his experiences may have been like.
Were your parents, did they stay married or they ended up getting divorced? You said,
They did you got that right.
Okay. So they ended up getting divorced. So your mom finally got away. What age were you when that happened?
I was about 10.
Okay.
I was 10.
But those scars of what you saw and witnessed and living in that fear stay with you.
They do stay with you. They do. And the interesting thing, when we look at the book, Listening When Parts Speak, one of the things that I'm sharing with the reader is parts of us are holding those traumas. And parts of us hold the traumas very differently. We have those young ones who were, at the age of, say, 5, like I said, the first time I knew that my mother was being abused, that 5-year-old is holding that trauma that she really couldn't understand what was going on, right? And then you have older parts of yourself, like, say, my 10-year-old who experienced the trauma of the divorce. She's a little more sophisticated, obviously, than a 5-year-old, but yet there were still parts of that she didn't understand. So different parts of us hold different time periods of trauma, and they experience the trauma very differently. We experience, I should say, the trauma very differently at different ages in our lives and have different understandings also of what was happening.
Well, don't you think too, that has to do with your brain development, obviously? So if you're experiencing that kind of witnessing that kind of abuse at 5 and 10, it's a different experience, but it's going to stay with you. Like, I know for me, I grew up with a stepfather that was mentally abusive. He was not physically abusive to me. But I have flashbacks, and I've had lots of therapy, of things he might have said to me, or the way he looked. Or I've talked about this before. I struggled with an eating disorder, and he would come up behind me when I was getting food out of the refrigerator and clear his throat. There's things that have stuck with me for all of these years. I've mentioned before, I've done EMDR, that's kind of helped. I'm sure you're familiar with some of this, but just what you're saying, exactly what you're saying. And then to be a child so young witnessing that stuff. So my heart goes out to you because that's really, really difficult. So as your mom finally left when you were at the age of 10, and then so you went on to live a life doing, going to college, I'm assuming, like a pretty good life. And then you went into this field because you wanted to give back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely wanted to help people to heal.
So tell me a little bit about like your book and like why you ended up going into the field you're in right now. Can you discuss that? Because I haven't done specifically an episode in all these 4 years about like exactly what we're talking about, which is it IFS? Am I correct?
Yes, internal family systems.
So tell me about that, because I would love to know more about that.
So while I was working with women who had sexual abuse histories for like 20 years, I hadn't heard of IFS, although it was already around. I read a book that mentioned IFS, and the book is called The Body Keeps the Score. And it mentioned IFS, and I was like, oh my goodness, this would be a game changer for me in working with my clients. So I went to a training and got trained in IFS. And long story short, just to condense this, from knowing nothing about IFS, I am now a solo lead trainer in IFS. So I train other therapists in this model. And the main reason that Meghan, I shifted my whole practice over to IFS. It's just like every client I see, that's the therapy that I use with them now, because I saw the way it healed trauma. What I had found using other models, EMDR not being one of them, but other models, healing wasn't happening. Clients were learning skills to manage trauma, but healing wasn't happening. IFS actually goes back and heals that 5-year-old part of me that was holding the terror of seeing her mother's face beat up because, well, at the time I didn't realize it was my father, but that she was in pain, going back and healing those memories, those experiences, and what our parts make those experiences mean about us. Because often as young children, it's our fault some way, or we're responsible in some way. So that's what made me really lean into this therapy, use it with all of my clients, because I saw that we weren't just teaching people how to cope, manage, give them some skills. We were actually going back and healing the trauma. And that's why I wrote the book also.
Well, can you talk about IFS a little bit more? Because I'm going to be honest, I've never even heard of it. And I love finding new ways to help selfishly heal myself, because I'm obviously do this because I'm holding on to so much pain still. And like you said, there's not a quick fix. There's all different kinds of therapy. I've never heard of IFS, but is it specifically for like abuse survivors, or is it help with all kinds of like, so for me, we just met today. My listeners know this. I witnessed my sister, like being carried out by the paramedics when I was 2 because she had died, tragically. And my mom was a wreck, obviously. And I was like kind of kept in a high chair. So I did EMDR. I've been able to like talk about this memory without crying. For a long time I couldn't, but it's still there, you know? So I would love to know, can you go a little bit more into like, does it help every kind of trauma, and how exactly does it work?
Yes, it does help every type of trauma. And how IFS works is, one, IFS sees the human person as a group of, or constellation of parts. And we have what we call in IFS the self. The self is you, unblended, unconnected, to disconnected from those parts. Like you're not living in the pain of that experience you just shared about your sister. So the self is the healing component in IFS. So what we want are those parts that were harmed and experiencing the trauma to come into relationship with self. Those parts, like you being in that high chair at 2 years old by yourself, not really understanding what's going on around you, some scary things were happening, I'm sure, for a 2-year-old. Yourself can go back and be with that 2-year-old in the way she needed someone to be with her. Trauma happens, one, because of what happened to us, but it also is deepened because we didn't have someone with us to care for us in whatever way we needed back then. And we didn't have connection with ourselves in order to do that back then at 2 years old, like when you're talking about the brain development. So as an adult, what we do is we connect our clients, those parts of them that are holding the trauma, we connect them to their own self-energy. And one of the things about we have the capacity to heal whatever it is that has happened to us. So an IFS therapist is helping you connect with your own, what we call self-energy, in order to heal those parts of yourself that still need that healing so that you can be whole. And then they can continue to be in relationship with yourself.
Got it. Can you explain like what a session might look like? Because there's so many different like types, like tapping, EMDR I brought up, talk therapy. What does a session kind of look like? Just for my listeners that might, because I'm interested, I want to go do a session right away.
So one of the very first thing that we want to do is have the person connect with the part, and our parts live in our bodies. So do you mind if can I do it with you?
Go ahead. Help me.
All right.
Please help me. Save me.
I'm just going to do just what we do to start our session. So the first thing, do you want to maybe work with that 2-year-old part that was in the high chair?
If I ugly cry, my audience is used to it. So go for it. Yeah, okay. We'll do that one.
All right. So what I want to ask you to do, Meghan, is are you okay with just closing your eyes or either softening your gaze if that feels more comfortable. So I just want you to notice where in your body or around your body do you experience this 2-year-old part?
In my chest, for sure. Like throat, chest. Yeah.
Throat and chest. Beautiful. I just want you to bring your attention to your throat and your chest where you notice this young part. And as you focus there, tell me what more you notice.
I kind of notice like a deep, like a throbbing kind of feeling, like almost like where you're trying not to think about it and cry, like how it feels when you're about to cry, that kind of feeling.
So you feel that throbbing, just like on the brink of tears and crying. Yeah. So as you notice that, how do you feel toward this 2-year-old?
Just like deep love. Like I wish I could just hug her,
Yeah. Oh, I feel that. I really feel that. So what I want you to do, Meghan, is just radiate that deep love toward this part of you, this young 2-year-old. Just let her feel your love. What do you notice as you extend that love to her?
I can picture myself like at that age perfectly just from pictures. Yeah. And this is hard.
Yeah. You're with you. I'm here.
Yeah, just I'm smiling at her and she's looking back like confused almost.
Okay. See if she knows who you are. Let's ask her. Do you know who I am?
Yeah. It's hard to say that out loud. Because you don't want to get emotional, but yeah.
She does. Okay, good. So this is what I'm going to do, Meghan, because I just wanted to give a taste of this. I'm going to be quiet for a moment. And I just want you to be with her, however she needs you to be with her, just right now. Like you said, she was enjoying that loving connection. I don't know if she wants to be held, she wants to be close to you, just however she wants to connect.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely wants to be held.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just hold her for a moment. And just let her know that you want to get to know her. Like, you want to know her story from her.
Okay.
How does she respond to that?
Like happy, smiling.
She's happy and smiling. So this question is for you, Meghan.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, do you want me to have you get to know a little bit of her story, or does this feel like a place you want to pause?
I probably want to pause because my listeners know what I'm capable of, and I will end up ugly crying for quite a while, and I really don't want that to happen. This is obviously still something that I need to work through. So just starting there. Go ahead. Okay.
So can I have you just close your eyes again just for a moment?
Yeah.
I want you to reconnect with that little one because we don't want to leave her just hanging there, right? So I just want you to reconnect with her again. And just let her know that you're going to come back and spend some time with her to get her story.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we just did is just the very beginning of an IFS session. We want to go to the part of us that holds the pain, help our clients go to the part of us that holds the pain, and spend time getting to know that part, learning their story. Like, you know her story from kind of what's been told to you, because you're only 2. So what's been told to you, what you've uncovered in therapy from a head space. But IFS allows us to know the part's story from the part's perspective. And then we know what needs to be healed. Because now the part has told us what was hard for her in that. What did she need in those moments? How did her life change as a result of her sister's passing? You know, so all of these will be the questions that we would move toward. And so one of the reasons that I was so excited about writing Listening When Parts Speak is because I wanted to bring this experience to folks who may not go to therapy. You know, because first of all, there's not enough therapists to go around for all the people who need therapy. It's
true.
So we need self-help books so that people can do some of this work themselves. So what would I do if you were my client and you're coming back to the next session? We would connect with that 2-year-old and hear her story. And it might take several sessions to hear her whole story, but we would hear her story. And you notice that you had this loving presence with her in the beginning, that self-energy, that self-energy. So that's what we would continue. The way that we continue to be in relationship with her is from your self-energy, something she didn't get at 2 years old. And then we would find out, who does the 2-year-old, what is she protecting? Or what does she come to think about herself that she can now, which are burdens, that she gets to release? And
you know what's interesting about what you're saying is that was hard. I'm not going to lie. Because I could picture her perfectly. I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to work past this really hard memory in different ways. But recently I realized, you know, like my mom and I have not always gotten along perfectly. We're very different. There's a lot of anger about my childhood and my stepfather, and, you know, I lost my dad and abandonment and all the stuff that we have. But recently we went on this trip to Charleston, South Carolina, and it was the most wonderful time because my mom's 80 that she and I got to spend together. And I realized when I did a session of EMDR where I worked on that specific memory, this was probably like 4 or 5 months ago, that little girl was holding on for her whole life to protecting my mom.
Yeah.
Because my mom was the one that lost the baby, found my sister, was screaming through my downstairs, ran outside, was in shock, because my sister had a liver disease. So they knew she was sick. Yeah. And not to like change the subject, but I think this is important for my listeners to hear, to get to a place where I don't know how much, we never know how much longer I could go first. We just don't know in life who's going to go first. Yeah. But to spend that time with my mom, just like talking on this trip, because it was just she and I, like most of the time, because my sister and everyone else got sick. And so we spent all this time together and realized like, I'm not okay with what happened in my childhood, but I'm okay with you and I love you.
Yeah. Oh.
But just to like go back to that memory and say that to you, like I've already kind of worked through some of this, but I know I have so much more work to do. So IFS sounds amazing.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I was working on something from my childhood for, again, seeing my mom be abused for 20 years in traditional therapy. And in IFS, I got to do what we call a demonstration, where one of the people who are attending when I was learning it volunteers to bring some of their real trauma, and then the trainer does a session, kind of like what I was doing with you, but a complete hour session. And in that hour, Meghan, I experienced more healing than I had in 20 years of therapy about my childhood. And that, if nothing would have convinced me, that did, because I had a personal experience of how powerful IFS is. And then I went into my own IFS therapy after completing the training.
Well, let me ask you a question, because that's a really good point. So, and I would never belittle talk therapy. Any kind of therapy that you can do, I think, like you and I obviously know, and part of why I do this is because we have a mental health crisis in our country, and people don't talk about it. And we have like a homeless issue, a drug and alcohol addiction issue. And I know that 90% of this stems from our mental health crisis. And I know, I would assume you think the same thing. Right. So,
and I would take that even one step further, Meghan.
Go ahead.
And say this stems from childhood trauma.
100%. 100%. So we're brought into the world as these like little innocent babies that have so much hope and energy and light. And we all are going to go through things in life, but childhood trauma, like the people I meet in life that have gone through childhood trauma, I connect with them in a different way than other people. I just do. Because it's almost like a club you don't want to be in.
You don't want to be a member of.
You don't want to be a member of it, but you just are like, I see you. You've gone through things too. Like, let's chat. And I truly think that. What I was going to say though, like going backwards a little bit about talk therapy is, I sometimes find myself, and I say this a lot, that when you are looking for a therapist, listeners, and it's like a date, it's like being on a dating app, right? Mm-hmm. You have to keep looking. You might not find the right therapist right away. But do you think that you get to a certain point and you're like somebody that's been in therapy forever and you're kind of like, I don't want to go to therapy today. I have nothing to talk about. You're almost like irritated by the fact that you're like, okay, let me talk about this again. I'm not getting anywhere. And I found like in life and with different therapists, and I love my therapist, Dr. Nay. I was with her for years, and she's reoccurring on my podcast, but I don't work with her anymore. But love her. But I found that, and this is nothing against her, but I found like you get to a certain point in talk therapy where you're like, okay, like, I guess I'm done. But then you leave, and like a month later, you're like, oh no, I need to get back in. And so it sounds like this is something that you're saying, like you found that gets you to that next place. Am I correct on that?
That's exactly correct. I at least that was my experience, and that's been experience that's been shared with me from other people. Like, I agree with you. talk therapy got me as far as it did, allowed me to do all the things that I've accomplished, the things that I've accomplished in life, and not, feel the burden of my upbringing. And being in IFS therapy, it took my healing to another level, because now, for instance, here's the thing. The relationship that I had with my father before entering IFS therapy was really reactive. I had parts that were really reactive to him, that we spent at one point 11 years estranged from each other from my early 20s to 30. When I went through IFS therapy, first of all, I never would have asked my father that question that I shared with you earlier about his own childhood. It was only through going through IFS therapy that, one, I had some compassion for him. Two, I was not having the reactivity to him doing the same things that he's always done, because my parts were healed. That's another thing, is your parts are the ones that are reacting to a person, a situation. You're not being what we call self-led. And when our parts get healed, my part that just wants to throw her hands up because dad's doing the whole thing that you need to be perfect and why aren't you doing this and you need to be doing the other thing. And I would just get frustrated and say, fine, I'm not going to deal with him anymore, because every time I do, I'm not good enough. He brings up all this, he churns up all this negativity within me. That didn't happen after IFS, because that part that was holding the need to be perfect and the parts of me that felt not good enough in the presence of my father were healed. So I could be with him doing the same things he's always done and just have a conversation about it.
But how did you get to the point? Because I love what you're saying, because it kind of aligns with what I said, where it's like you are, and I haven't done IFS. So everyone watch out, because once I do IFS, I will be healed of everything and I will be good. No, I'm just kidding. But like it aligns with, I'm not condoning what happened, right? And I'm just using you, but I'm able to get to a point where we can have a relationship. But how are you able to forgive the physical abuse of your mother? Are you able to just get past it and forgive, or put it in a place?
None of the above.
Okay.
Wow. That was such a great, oh my goodness. Okay. So it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't get past. It was that my parts that made that mean something about me were able to release that. Because what my parts were holding, and that's what we have to get to, my parts were holding that I wasn't good enough. If I would do XYZ, my mom wouldn't get beat. Mm-hmm. If I could somehow come between her and dad, she'd be saved. So my parts took that experience to mean that somehow I was defective. Like I didn't do enough to protect her. Once my parts were able to release that burden, the other thing that happens, the parts that we have, we've all been born with all the parts that we have. Our parts get burdened. So once that part that felt she wasn't good enough was able to release the burden, she now could be like when you were talking about children come into the world, with energy and love and wanting to connect. Mm-hmm. She was able to now be what she was meant to be, because now she wasn't holding the burden of taking care of my mom or feeling not good enough or defective because she didn't protect my mother. So no forgiveness of my father was needed. My part just needed to be healed. She needed to release the burdens that she was holding. And there's a part of IFS therapy where we actually the part tells us what their burdens are. We take them through an experience of releasing those burdens and then accessing their innate qualities, essential qualities that they were born with that got obscured or they didn't have access to because of the burdens. So we have them reconnect to those.
Do you think that part of IFS too, and I'll just use myself, and it sounds like we have that similar thing in common where you're a fixer, right?
Yes.
We share that Definitely. You kind of are able to let that go and be like, I'm not going to be a fixer anymore. Were you able to get past that? I would love to know that.
Yeah. So a fixer, perfectionistic, People pleaser. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's a big one.
You're talking my language. Yes.
Right. So all of these, but all of those were burdens. I was not born to be a people pleaser or a perfectionist or a fixer. That's what I took on in order to manage my life. Right?
Let me ask you something else. And I'm sorry if I'm over evaluating
no, you're doing great. Wonderful.
I just want to know, because I struggle with, if people don't like me, I hate it. I can't deal with it. I'm getting so much better because I've gone through like so many things where I've had to get to that point. And I wonder if that stems back from like my childhood, where it's like, if somebody like perfectionist, fixer, people pleaser, and if people don't like me, I can't like live in this body. It's so hard. I feel like I'm getting better, but I'm just curious if you're like that too.
Yes. And so, yes.
Okay.
People pleaser part would do all the things to make people like me. People pleasing was about people liking me, right? Yeah. But once I talk about this particular part in Listening When Parts Speak, that people pleaser that was always going out trying to get people to like me, bending, contorting ourselves in all these different ways that are not us, because we think that's what other people want. But that people pleaser part, in IFS, we call those our protectors. She's protecting some young, vulnerable part of me. And so once we understand why the people pleaser or any other part does what they're doing, we can get to the part that they're protecting. And that's the one that's holding the trauma. That's the one that's hurting. And so then we go and we heal that part. So all of these parts, like you just talked about, you too, a perfectionist, a fixer, a people pleaser, those are your protectors. And so what we want to get to is, who are they protecting? And then we want to heal those ones.
So if somebody's going to do this, or they're going to read your book and they're going to start doing IFS, is this like, if you're living wherever in the country, is it hard to find somebody that does this? I would love to know that.
Their IFS started on the East Coast. Richard Schwartz is the founder of IFS, and it kind of moved from the East Coast across the state. So pretty much you can find an IFS therapist in any state. You also can go to the IFS, ifs-institute.com and find providers in your state. So it's not hard. It is not hard to find IFS. I mean, there are IFS therapists across the country, but we're in demand. So that's the thing that might, does someone in your state have availability?
And then, so how long, if somebody starts doing IFS, I mean, I know therapy is different. All different therapy is different for everybody. How long do you start to see like changes, and is everybody different?
Everyone is different. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the way I want to answer that question. It depends, which I hate when people give me it depends, but it does depend. And the reason it does is how much trauma has my client experienced. Mm-hmm. The more trauma someone has experienced, the more protective their system is going to be, which means it's going to take longer for me to get to the ones that need to be healed. So that's really, I have clients I've seen for years, like 5, 6, 7 years, because they experienced a tremendous amount of trauma. And so those protectors are really entrenched in doing their job, and what they're protecting is the one who was harmed initially. So they don't want me or the client to connect to those vulnerable, like in your case, the 2-year-old. They do not want us to connect with those parts. So it takes more time of the client being in IFS therapy, trusting me, the therapist, and also most importantly, trusting their own self-energy to help in the healing process.
Well, I would assume you would really have to have an open mind. So already be at a point, because I could see what you're saying. If you start talking to somebody and they're like, if I wouldn't have done a lot of therapy already to even tap in that minute exercise that we did to that little girl that I already see and know, that I could see that it would take a lot longer to get there. Right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It really is about the amount of trauma someone has experienced.
Okay.
Because if I had someone who hadn't experienced as much trauma, but maybe I'm their first therapist, we could do some deep work in the first couple of sessions together.
Okay.
It's because the system is more protected based on the significance of the trauma or how long trauma happened. How many different trauma experiences has a person had and how severe were they? That's what's going to determine how long a person may need to be in therapy.
I mean, I literally am leaving this podcast and I'm going to be stalking you. Like, help me. What do I do next? But I want to know. So then we kind of like skipped ahead in this episode.
Yeah.
But I love what you do. I think you're amazing and so wonderful. But I want to know, like, what got you to the point of writing the book, and tell me a little bit more about the book for my listeners.
I love telling this story. So what got me writing the book was I was invited to create a meditation for a, what do you call it? It was a summit on legacy burdens and legacy gifts. And so I was going to write this meditation and lead the participants through this meditation. And at the time I was doing ancestral healing work. And so I couldn't find a meditation. I had no, inspiration. But that night, and I had 3 days to do this, that night, my ancestors came to me and gifted me with a meditation. It was a guided imagery meditation, and they gifted me with it by taking me through the meditation. So I was walking through the garden. I was experiencing all the things about the meditation firsthand. Very vibrant in colors and scents and smells and textures, all of that. I woke up. I knew that was the meditation for the summit, wrote the meditation up. And it went very well. My ancestors continued to gift me with meditations, and they said to me, these meditations will be a book.
Okay, wait a second. I have to stop you. Because if I have a listener right now going, what are you talking about? What is ancestral? Like, because we didn't really get into that at all, except in the very beginning. Yeah. Explain that to me. Are these like actual like people that you see? Explain all of this to me.
Yeah. So ancestor healing is a system that allows us to connect with our ancestors and heal generational trauma through connecting with our ancestral line. So we all have 4 ancestral lines to connect with, mothers, 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 fathers, father's mother, father's father. And so in this, what I'm talking about, this, the meditations came through my mother's line. That was the work that I was doing with an ancestral healing practitioner. That's who you hire in order to do this ancestral work. And so I wanted to heal the lines within my own family of the traumas that have been passed down for generations, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the work. So that's the work I was already doing. And then getting invited to create this meditation that had to do with legacy burdens. Okay, legacy burdens are the actual burdens that are handed down through trauma. So me being a Black woman, family originated in the southern parts of the United States. Mm-hmm. So my family has the ancestral or legacy burden of slavery, right? And so how that has impacted my family and been handed down through the generations, that's in the ways that we raise children, the ways that we see women's work or males' roles in the family, just whatever was handed down, we want to go back and heal that. So that's what ancestral healing work is about. Healing so that the trauma that has happened in anyone's family stops with you. If you are the one in your family that decides to do the ancestral healing work, you're doing it so that future generations don't also carry this trauma.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Right? You know what I'm going to say? It's weird that you bring that up. Because I was just in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was walking through the market. And sadly, that was back in the day. It's called the slave market in Charleston, South Carolina. My listeners are probably going to be like, you're so hokey and weird or whatever. But I've always picked up on energies. Like, I'm just one of those people, I can pick up on energy really quickly. And it's a beautiful place. I love Charleston. It's one of my, it probably is my favorite city in the country, but it has that deep, dark past of that place. And as I walk down the street, most people I don't think would even think about that, but I did. And it was at night and it was empty. It was like a Monday. And I looked to, I think my sister, I was talking to either my sister or no, I must have been with my mom. And I just was saying like, there's like a bad energy there. Like I can't explain it. And so like to be able to be carrying that trauma of slavery. And I know this is kind of off the point, but like to get rid of like the anger piece of that, like for a human being, like, is that what you had to work through to be not angry? Cause that I would be pretty freaking angry. And I know I'm a white woman and I can never relate to what you carry with you. But I just want to say, like, I cannot even imagine how angry I would be walking down and knowing that that happened.
So it's interesting. I'm listening to you, Meghan. I love this. And you said, I would be angry, right? I would be carrying so much anger. The way that I move through the world now because of IFS, I realized a part of me was angry. Like not me. Me, the self, is not harmed by anything that's happened in the past.
I'm sorry. I'm like emotional from that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
it is emotional.
yeah.
When you were saying it, I was feeling the emotion. It is emotional. But there are parts of me that we're furious. We're angry. We're raging. I mean, I have raging parts.
Yeah.
I used to think I was the rager. There were parts of me that were just so angry that it showed up as rage. And IFS helped heal those parts, help them release the rage that they were holding. Because that comes up in, the way that I was raising my children, the way that I was dating, the way that, if you're carrying rage, it's going to show up, or any of the burdens that we carry. They're going to show up in our relationships with other people. So I love the fact that you said I would be angry.
Yeah.
Be a part of you carrying this anger, but there'll be other parts of you that are very healthy and not carrying the anger. And we want to heal the ones that are. We want to heal the parts that are burdened.
I just think it's an amazing, I think I'm smarter than I look. And I've just never heard of this until today. And so it's kind of like, a whole new world that I can't wait to learn more about. And I hope if you're a listener and you're listening to this stuff, there's a whole new world. There's so much stuff out there that we're so fortunate. And we're just at like the tip of the iceberg, right? Of learning about how to heal our minds and our generational trauma, like you brought up.
So I want to just
go ahead
a little bit more now that you're talking about this being new for your listeners. The generational trauma piece of it and why ancestors are important in that is because I only know what I know about my history, right? Like I don't know the details of what my family line dealt with in slavery or beyond, like when they were in Africa. Like I'm sure there was trauma there too. I don't know that, but my ancestors do. And that's why it's important to include the ancestors in this legacy unburdening, the release of these legacies that have come down through our generational lines, having the ancestors be a part of that. They know, I have contact with these ancestors who know what happened, who know the burdens of the line, not just what I know, but they know the burdens of the line, because that's what we want to release. We want to release all of those burdens that have come down through our ancestral line. So that's why we invite the ancestors in, because they have more knowledge than you or I have about our lineages.
And so like you get to a certain place, you wrote this amazing book that I can't wait to read.
Yes.
And now you're like, I mean, here's the thing. I talk to therapists all the time. We're human beings. You're a human being. Yeah. I'm a human being. There's no such thing as being 100% healed. It just does not. We're all a work in progress. Every day you get out of bed, is, I think, like a test. And until like we're done on this, in this world, and we're called, I'm spiritual, to like go to see God, we're still like getting healing, getting through these things. Whereas we're fortunate to be in a place where we're open to this, you and I, whereas a lot of people aren't. And then they spend their whole lives angry, resentful of like generational trauma, or resentful that they were abused, and they don't want to work through it. What do you say? I know that for sake of time, I could talk to you for hours, but what do you say to somebody that's like not open to it, not open to like generational trauma and like doing the work, or not open to like healing?
So this person that I'm speaking to, is this someone who's come in for help?
No, this could just be anybody. Like this could be a listener of mine. This could be anyone. This could be somebody that accidentally is listening to the podcast, and they usually listen to like Joe Rogan. I'm joking. This could be like anybody, you know, like there's a lot of people out there. I think I know them, and they could be family members or friends, angry people. Yeah. And it's, I think, because they don't want to work through things.
So this is the question I'd have for that person. What are you afraid would happen if you let go of your anger? What are you afraid would happen if you let go of your anger? I'd be curious what they'd say to that.
I love that. I think that's a great question. Well, I would love to tell you, like I could talk to you, like I would like to do a whole session the next time.
My goodness, Meghan.
It's been so wonderful talking to you today. For my listeners, where can they find you?
They can find me at tamalafloyd.com. That's my website. That's where they can find out what I'm doing, where I'm going to be. And I would love to connect with your listeners.
And where can they get your book?
Oh, my book is available at the small bookstores. It's also available at big ones like Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, pretty much everywhere.
Okay. Well, it's so lovely to meet you today. I think you're wonderful. I'm going to be stalking you about doing this. And, and thank you for starting my Saturday and my weekend where I could check in with my little 2-year-old Meghan, because I needed to see her little face. So I think you're lovely. And thank you so much. Everyone, I this whole month, my main thing that I talk about on my platform is suicide prevention. I'm still here. In 2020, I didn't want to be. And I started this. I'm going to tell you this in closing really quickly, because I want to help people out there that could be struggling with not wanting to be here as well. It's Suicide Prevention Month. And my story is one that I kept going. And I tell you guys every podcast, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Like we all matter. It just takes 5 minutes. You know, tell someone you're struggling. There's so many people out there that are willing to help. And if you know someone that doesn't have anybody and can't get with a therapist or doesn't have the money, reach out to me. I try to always, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a licensed professional, but I can connect you. And I have my listeners in the past. You can find me at Judging Meghan. That's Meghan, because I spell it the right way. And I adore you, my audience and my listeners. I just love hearing from you. And in closing, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Tamala.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.